Welcome to the Real Estate Fight Club, a podcast for agents where you'll witness a battle of opinions about topics affecting your real estate business. Now, always in your corner, here are your hosts, Jenn Mertland and Monica Weekly.
Hello and welcome to Real Estate Fight Club. This is a series called Better Call Saul, where we discuss what is currently possible that if it were impossible, or what is currently impossible that if it were possible would fundamentally change the way we do business as real estate agents. On today's episode, we'll be talking about what if there was no guaranteed compensation to the buyer's agent. Ooh, big topic. Well, here with me today is my co-host Rachael Real, broker owner of Rachael Real Estate in Chicago. She has been an agent for 18 years and has been on the Pro Standards Committee for 8 of those years, currently serving as the 3 times past chair, and she is passionately nerdy about all things real estate. Even nerdier is
even nerdier than me would be Saul Klein. Saul is the godfather of real estate technology. He's been licensed to sell real estate for over 47 years. He was an original team member of Realtor.com and the creator of NAR's technology certification program known as ePro. Saul was personally responsible for the first 500,000 listings to be displayed to the public on Realtor.com, spearheading listing syndication, which is the distribution of your listings to the consumer over the internet. Welcome, Saul, and let's dive into today's topic, which is, Jenn, repeat what is our topic again today?
What if there was no guarantee of compensation to the buyer's agent? But so let's give some context here.
Break it down a little bit.
Yeah, like why is there guaranteed compensation now? What's kind of like, give us a short history of that.
Well, so the reason we're talking about this again is because of this litigation. It's a case, Moeller versus the National Association of Realtors and 4 or 5 of the major franchises and MLSs in the country. And so there's this case that is challenging a clause in the MLS guidelines promulgated by the National Association of Realtors that we lovingly refer to as the broker compensation clause. And so if you sell real estate and you're a member of a multiple listing service, then you typically don't worry about getting paid on the buyer side because you know there's it's a pillar of MLS, and it has become this since the early 90s, where the MLS, one of the things it does, it's an offer of compensation, and it's a great tool. It allows competitors to cooperate to create a robust marketplace, the envy of the world. And so it's worked since the 90s, where if I find a buyer, you go out and you work hard and you prospect and you get a listing, and I'm out and I meet somebody that wants to buy a property, I can, without a commitment from them, I can get an offer, bring that offer to the listing agent and the seller. And if there's a transaction that's completed, I'm going to get paid in that transaction. And I can represent the buyer as a fiduciary while doing that. And what allows that is the structure of the MLS, which is a broker offer of compensation. It's being challenged in court. It's just been this Moeller case has just been certified for class action status, and that's a big deal. If you estimated damages for some people are estimating in the hundreds of billions of dollars.
Oh, I'm sure, depending on how far you go back.
5 years, they're saying 5 years, 2014, 2015 to 2020, something like that. All the transactions and a portion of the commissions, and it could total in the, let's just say, multi-billions of dollars.
They're saying it's because as the buyer, I paid the buyer agent commission through my offer, but I was not able to negotiate it. That's like the crux of...
So the plaintiffs in the case are sellers.
Okay. Exactly.
And the sellers say, you know what? When the listing agent took the listing, they said, we're going to charge, I'm just going to make this up, 5%. And we're going to split that with the person who brings in the offer. Now, that person that brings in the offer isn't going to represent you seller as a fiduciary, but we're going to pay them. That's going to be the way that this works. And
we're going to pay them to negotiate against you as the seller.
Well, we're going to pay them. We didn't probably tell them we're going to pay them to negotiate.
No, but in reality, I think that's probably part of what spurred some of this too, is they realized that they didn't get an opportunity to say, well, wait a minute, I don't want to pay them X. I want to pay them Y. Yeah.
So to see from a seller's position, because when I talk to a lot of realtors, number one, don't even understand this, don't know about this.
No.
And when you tell them about it, they'll say, well, that'll never happen. Poo-poo that. Right.
It's happening.
Yet here we are.
And these people don't have a clue. Isn't it? It's the internet, right? People are not always right, but never in doubt. And so we've got these folks, and they're in the groups, and they don't know they're digging their own grave, right? In these Facebook groups and online, they're saying things exactly what the plaintiff is saying, and so there is
100%.
Right. So these sellers have said, you know what? We weren't, and you could probably interview a lot of sellers, they would say the same thing. We were really kind of never given the option to say that we should offer less commission. So we were actually forced to pay more, because if you'd have asked us how much do you want to pay to the buyer's agent, we'd have said nothing. Or we'd have said
nothing. Exactly.
Right.
So why should I?
Well, as the listing, I think two things. One, if I'm given the option, I would, as a seller, I would be like, well, I don't want to pay them anything. Their person should pay them.
Right.
That's what they would probably say, unless they understood how the marketplace worked.
Right.
Right.
By the marketplace,
then you launch into that conversation.
Yeah. The conversation is, do you want every realtor in town trying to sell your house? Because if you want every realtor in town trying to sell your house, you have to offer them something. Well, can't they get money from their buyer? They could, but do you want every realtor in town fighting to sell your house?
Realtors are not allowed to show based on the commission.
Correct.
Well, that's part of the argument is, right? So that's why it's kind of been, if you went and checked the records, you'd see that probably nationwide commissions offered to buyers agents are fairly consistent. I would venture to speculate. Right?
Yeah, right. I would venture to speculate that as well.
Okay. So
you're at least within your marketplace. If I pull up a report of my entire town and look at every line item of cooperative compensation, you're going to get about 95% are X. And then you've got a couple of outliers, here or there for various reasons.
Yeah. And might some agents that are looking for properties for buyers, might they go into an MLS and say, this one's paying less, so I'm not going to show it? That's part of the argument.
They should not do that.
But they should not do that, right?
That's really unethical. No. But as the listing agent, if I'm like, okay, as a salesperson and I'm representing you and it's doing whatever, I say, okay, this is what I charge. I'm not then getting permission from you on how I allocate that charge. It's none of your, none of your business. This is what I charge. Do you think that charge is fair? So like in this case, in your example, I charge 5%. If you think that's fair, then I'm going to do what I do to, and I'm not telling you, do you want me to market it here? Do you want me to market it here? Do you want me to offer an incentive for these people or not? We already agreed to the 5% or whatever it is. And now I get to do with it what I want.
But I would bet you that most agents actually disclose that there's a cooperative commission.
Oh, yes. I mean, our listing agreements for as long, I've been doing this 18 years and they've changed over the years, but they have always required that disclose and you show the split and how that's divided.
It was in the listing agreement,
I would argue why.
Absolutely.
I mean,
because it's clear, that's transparency with your client, because here's the thing, you're working for them as their fiduciary. So you can only dictate what you charge as the listing agent. You can't.
No, but if I'm a dual agent, no, but if I charge, and part of what I charge is that I spend some of that money, I pre-spend it on certain things like marketing on different platforms,
photography,
pictures,
different
doing
things.
Whatever.
Sure.
But then on the back end, I offer incentives to certain people to also bring their clients, because it's for the benefit of my seller. And even though I have to share what we agreed that I would get paid, I'm not getting their permission because I'm getting the outcome that they wanted.
But I don't think that's the way it works, Jennifer. I think that Rachel's right. I kind of remember, and I haven't sold real estate for other people in a long time, but I kind of remember that in the listing agreement itself, you would actually state how much you would give to the cooperating broker. You would say
Yeah, I think
that.
we
So
should take it out.
you had to address it because it
Right.
was in the listing
I think
agreement.
we need to take it out.
For 20, oh, hold on though, for 20 some odd years now, that's what it's been. This is X, this is the whole amount of commission.
Yeah, but it
And
makes
now
no
it's
sense.
being, well, it does, but it's being split between here's what on the listing side, here's what's going on the buyer side. Now, last week, our board came out with a new listing agreement, which takes that very small compensation paragraph from 4 or 5 lines to 3/4 of a page. So now it is,
Why?
because it breaks down every last line item. Here's
So-
what the listing charge
remember,
is.
the
Here's the buyer's
MLS
charge.
The MLS is an offer of compensation. That's what
Sure.
it is, right? So somehow you have to guarantee, so that as a listing agent,
Right.
when you go in, you want, and actually you could use it as a point of differentiation if you wanted to. You could say, I'm going to charge you 7% commission. That's what I'm going to charge you because I'm going to do all these things, Jennifer, that you talked about. And I'm going to try to motivate every other realtor out there that has a fiduciary duty to their side. I'm going to try to motivate them to bring me offers. So I'm going to give them 4 out of the 7. You could do that. And that would be,
Right.
and you might list with me.
Why do I need to get your permission to do that?
Because you're charging them, that seller is paying that, and they deserve to know where that money is coming, or where that
I
money
don't
is
tell
going.
them how much I pay for pictures.
Yeah, but you don't, but that's the point. You don't have to, if this law goes through, if this case is, if the plaintiffs prevail in this case, they're going to say the offer of compensation has kept commissions artificially high on the buyer's side, therefore eliminate that. And so if
Right.
that's eliminated from the listing agreement, and if it's eliminated from the MLS, then how would you get, this is our question, then if you have a stable of buyers, you're not going to want to bring your buyer in and show them. They might go around your back. They might call that seller up after you leave them and say, look, we're going to save some money here. Let's split the difference. We can, this agent that showed me the property, let's cut them out of the deal. And that can happen, right? And so if you couldn't,
that does happen. Not it can. It does.
well, then that's Rachel's specialty. That's procuring. That's what procuring cause is all about, right? That's
Right.
We have this concept in real estate called procuring cause. That's a whole nother conversation, right? And a long,
Oh yes, and a long one, right? That's not a short one at all.
yeah. So what we're talking about is currently it's a no-brainer. You can be brain dead and you can feel pretty good that you're going to get a commission if you've got a real estate license and you're a member of an MLS and you find a buyer and you bring them in and the deal is consummated and it closes, you're going to get paid. You didn't need to have a written agreement at all. What if that
there's no
is
guarantee
not the case anymore?
Then Rachel,
what-
my dream will come true, and all agents representing buyers would have a written agreement for their fee and their charge
Yes,
to
they
represent
would.
a buyer.
Yes, they would.
And that's the best in this litigation. That's the best course of action, right?
Right.
You
So
should
the
use
argument
buyer
is that
contracts.
some people will say to you what you had said before. Some people will go then. They may go to the seller directly, but they already kind of sometimes do that.
Well, so there are issues that are going to come out of this. If in fact the plaintiff prevails, and if sellers say, well, good, I don't want to pay any commission to the other side. And then if buyers don't realize the value that an agent can bring that represents them, then you're going to have only sellers represented in a real estate transaction.
Yeah, and
they're
that's
gonna
going
be
to end
back to-
very quickly. We already know what happens, right? I mean, you had said, like, this is how it was before all
Right.
agents represented sellers.
Yes,
Right.
all
We're going to be
agents
back to the
represented-
early 90s again.
And then what
early
happened?
90s.
Earlier.
It
Yeah,
changed.
Yeah, so early 90s, the MLS was a unilateral offer of sub-agency,
Right.
right? And because of agency disclosure laws and the dilemma that put agents in where they were representing the seller because they were members of the MLS and yet they were disclosing they represented buyers, that's an undisclosed dual agency.
Mhm.
Right.
And disgorgement of commission is a penalty for that. people were really put at risk. So the rules in the MLS were changed, and the MLS changed from a unilateral offer of subagency to an offer of compensation to benefit consumers. So consumers could be represented. And now what's being challenged is that clause in the MLS rules. And if that goes away, so what's your best course of action to mitigate liability if you're practicing real estate today? And the answer is get a buyer broker agreement, not an agency disclosure, but a buyer broker
agreement.
Could it be possible that if this offer of compensation goes away, then so does the MLS?
Well, I don't know. MLS still provides a very valuable service. It creates an inventory, the cleanest inventory of property available because of the rules that are set up in it. So no, there's a huge value to what MLS brings to the table. And I used to do a program where I said there were three legs to the stool of MLS, and I haven't done that in a while, so I don't remember the other two. But the primary one was it was an offer of compensation, right? Now, if that went away,
if that went away, it ends up going back to being a marketing tool, and then perhaps we end up as agents, as listing agents, having to pay to put our listings in there, which is how it was, again prior to the early 90s.
There used to be now I believe that the MLSs of the future, that data about what's for sale, when it's for sale, how long it's on the market, all that information can be sold to the capital markets, where the entities that buy loans can have more transparency as to the risk of the loan without any detriment to the real estate practitioners. And there's enough money there to fund MLS. That's another conversation.
That's a whole nother conversation. That's a conversation about greed.
No, not about greed. That's a conversation about utilizing what I call exhaust data, utilizing the data to fund this apparatus that creates a marketplace.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. I'm just saying, will the MLS, I agree, but I'm saying, will the people that run the MLSs consider that? Would they then say, oh, okay, this is enough money coming in that then it can be free for the user, the MLS, the realtors, or are they going to say, oh, great, now we're making more money?
No, that's the story that I'm taking to the industry is that's not it at all. The way the internet works is, for the most part, if you have a content provider, there's a whole career now called content providers, right?
Right.
If you're a content provider, you get paid. You don't pay people to be a content provider. You get paid if you're a content provider. This is common sense. We should be
paid, not pay for it.
And so MLS is no different. We just have to socialize this concept and idea to the world, and we're going to do that, right?
Let's do it. I like it. So if then the MLS became more of a marketing tool, the buyers, do you think that we would see more? I feel like we would see more properties because like big, what am I trying to say here? Like places with a lot of agents may sell a lot of more off-market stuff because maybe there's some type of an agreement where it's a variable rate if you work inside of our commission, inside of our brokerage versus outside.
So what's your question? Are there going to be more listings?
Do you think we'll see more of that?
Or more off MLS, that concept?
Because, okay, here, let me give you an example. So I'm a buyer's agent and we're going to sign an agreement that it's like, okay, here's what we charge. Maybe there's a variable rate inside of that. Unless there's a property that's inside of my brokerage, then the rate is less.
Well, it could be. Now we're talking about a menu of services.
Yeah.
Right?
Do you think we'll see that? I mean, that seems like that would happen.
That makes sense. Here's the issue with that for me is that there's such a low barrier to entry to becoming a salesperson in real estate.
Oh, no kidding.
And because of that, to have complex compensation structures just isn't in the cards, at least currently.
Right. Well, because I mean, look at what we have right now and the number of agents and the percentage of agents that are currently working that actually understand it.
Yeah, but
I'm going to go with there's
Rachel,
probably 70% that don't.
Oh, right, or more. But isn't now
not right? I'm being nice.
Isn't now your contract more complicated on the compensation?
It is not.
Piece?
No, I would agree that it's far less complicated. It takes up more physical space on a form, but it's here is the listing cost. Here's what I charge as a listing agent. What do you want to pay it to the buyer's agent to bring in that buyer? What do you want to pay if that buyer calls me directly and chooses to be unrepresented? What do you want to pay if it's a dual agent where I'm representing both, if I choose to do that as an agent, if I choose to act as a dual agent? It's not unclear, and it's not goofy. It's not difficult to understand. I would argue it's the complete opposite. The whole reason this was done was for transparency to the consumer. The only thing I'm wondering at this point is, now that that's out, there are, of course, brokerages that have their own legal counsel, their own corporate, or their own version of a listing agreement that isn't going to follow that same standard. It's going to be completely different than what the board listing agreement is, which is following suit from all of these different lawsuits that are happening and trying to stay relevant with what's going on. So, Saul, what is your thought on whether or not a company that uses their own version of a listing agreement, which is a completely different conversation around compensation, compared to one that is broken it down like ours has?
Well, I think
that's going to be, if you're a seller and you've got two agents coming in for a listing appointment, and I'm going over our listing agreement and spelling that out very clearly, giving them the option to pay the buyer compensation. How much do you want it to be? What if it's an unrepresented buyer? And then you have another agent coming in using their own agreement that just says, hey, we charge you X and you got no say in anything else. That seller is going to be a little confused.
Yeah, I think your attorneys are going to be real happy in that case, right? And because that's what will happen. So let's go back to agency disclosure. The purpose really behind agents and the thought behind agency disclosure was, if you disclose to a consumer the types of representation that are available to them, that
Precisely.
Negotiation will begin. That's what will start that whole conversation. So rather than having rules that said you must have a contract with the buyer, just like you have, rather than mandated by the state, what the state, in this case California, spread across the country, other states try to dilute the whole thing and created broker-only rules or facilitator rules, right? Certain states, they tried to just supersede and get around this whole concept. But the idea behind agency disclosure was just that. It was, look, consumer, you need to know these are the ways you can be represented in a real estate transaction. You can be represented exclusively as a seller agent. You can be represented exclusively by a buyer's agent, or you can be represented, one can represent both sides, dual agency. Which do you choose? And the likely follow-on question would be, how much do I pay for each one? It never got to that. It never evolved because the realtors never learned enough about the purpose of agency disclosure. It became another piece of paper that had to get signed. They did it at the last minute as an afterthought. Again, I haven't practiced real estate in years. I could tell you the way it was when I was teaching.
Oh, and it's no different now. It's no different now. I mean, I'm filling out files for an agent. Right? No. You're always going back as a broker, going, hey, you're missing the buyer agency disclosure.
Yeah.
You got to have something in this file that says you represented the buyer. Where is it? Oh, I never got it. Well, go get it.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
don't you think that, Saul, to that earlier question though, do you think that's going to be confusing for a seller as we're going through this transition? For a seller to have one conversation with one agent and an entirely different conversation with another agent around compensation when they're interviewing agents to sell their home?
I do. I absolutely. Yeah. Now, there is no substitute for your own due diligence. And people are telling me how smart consumers are. Have you ever heard that? Hey, we got these consumers. Well, you know what? You ought to be smart about the biggest transaction of your life. And so you're right, Rachel, it will be confusing, but that's not an excuse to me for a seller not understanding. They better learn, and they better learn quick, but then that brings the attorneys into our world, right?
Right. Well, and here's what I'm experiencing so far is I've had this conversation as if this new listing agreement we have now has been in place for a long time. I've always had that conversation in that way. Now it's just on paper. So when I'm meeting with sellers and I'm going through this, they're looking at me like I have three heads because they're like, well, no one's ever told us this before. So does the consumer then, who is interviewing, say, 5 agents, if we want to be super broad, and I'm the only one that has that conversation with them about how that compensation breaks down as we're discussing it here, and 4 others say, well, no, that's not how it works. We just do this. do I then look like the one who doesn't know what they're talking about and I'm just blowing smoke?
No.
Because I'm 1 out of 5.
No, I believe you look like you differentiate yourself. So I used to be
One would think so.
all in favor of make the contract more complex. Agents would complain, "Oh no, the contract's 2 pages. Oh no, the contract's 4 pages." I would say, "That's great." Because one of the ways you build trust and confidence in a real estate relationship is you demonstrate expertise to people. And one of the ways to do that is by going through the contract. It used to drive me crazy that one of the things I would do to a buyer is I would give them a blank contract before we even went out and looked at property. And I'd say, read this contract over. I want you to ask me any questions. I know other agents don't do this, but this is important. This is the biggest purchase of your life. You should learn about it. I'm here to help you. I'm here to consult. Let's go through this contract. Oh, again, other agents haven't told you. Here's something that matter of fact, next time, if you happen to interview another agent, ask them about this. Right. If you happen to interview ask them about liquidated damage provisions. Ask them about arbitration clauses. Right. Because I remember agents would skip over those things because they couldn't understand them themselves.
Right. And so how can they explain that to a consumer?
Well, they never read it anyway, so that's why they. So if we were gonna wrap a messy bow on this, what if there was no
very messy bow?
Very messy. And dirty. What if there were no guaranteed compensation to the buyer's agent? Final thought.
If you're not already using them, begin to use what we refer to as a buyer broker agreement. We used to call them exclusive authorization to locate property forms.
I love that.
Exclusive authorization.
It's down and dirty. I mean, let's just be honest. Let's just call it what it is and something that the consumer can understand.
And that's going to protect you in the future. And it'll also protect you maybe against things that might happen, fallout that might come from the Moeller case, Burnett, that was the kind of class action certification now, and a couple of other lawsuits that are out there. So start using buyer broker agreements. If you don't understand them, learn about them.
Yeah. Right. Ask your broker. And if your broker doesn't understand,
ask us.
Maybe you want to consider a broker who does. I mean, I'm just going to put it out there.
One of your greatest assets is the Association of Realtors, in which you're a member, probably.
Absolutely. So, go to your board. Go to your continuing ed. Don't take your CE online either. Take it through your board, where it's specific to your marketplace, where you have really great quality.
We're going to fight about that. Saul doesn't even like CE.
No,
I'm not saying I love CE, but there's
going to help you make more money.
Well, if you've got an option between online CE where you hit the next button while you're in the shower, versus a CE class, if you've got to do it, a CE class with someone through your board who is specific to your market, who can speak to what's going on in your market and how that changes things. Why would you take, if you've got to do it, why wouldn't you take the one that's going to benefit you?
And I would say, even if there's no CE credit, but it's going to teach you how to use buyer broker contracts, take the course.
My gosh, why aren't you there now?
Going to teach you how to sell. But if you do an example of a buyer, agreement, text buyer agreement to 513-400-1691, and I'll get that for you. Rachel, if people have a referral for you in Chicago, or they have a question for you, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
The best way to reach me is by cell phone, call or text at 630-542-8688, or via email at ourreal@dealwithreal.com.
Awesome. And it's Saul, if people want to get a hold of you, or they want to stay up on some of these issues, can they get a hold of you? How can they stay up on the issues?
Saul at bettercallsaul.realtor. Saul at bettercallsaul.realtor. We have a Facebook group, Real Talk. You can find me on LinkedIn. And the Data Advocate is going to be resurfaced here real soon. So thedataadvocate.com. And we'll be talking about all these things because they're all current. It's funny. They've always been current, and they've
always been current.
Awesome. Thanks for being on, guys.
Good to see you.
Thanks, Saul.
Take care.